Hey Nina,
Hi, Ben.
how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Good to
Good.
see you.
It's good to see you. It's been a few minutes since I last.
Yeah, I think it's been 6 years since I was in Lawrence, right?
God,
Crazy.
yeah,
hmm
we were just kids then.
Our eyesight was better than it is now.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah, that the sorted book projects with the William Burroughs folks. That
Yes,
was
I
fun.
think I think back very fondly on that amazing week or so that it was, and yeah, I'm still in touch with many people that I met during that
Oh, really?
week there, and I get to talk about the project with William Burroughs books quite often. It's sort of a real benchmark for me, but I loved
Hmm.
being in Lawrence. I hope there's a chance to come back sometime.
I hope so too. And remember the art car parade was that
Oh
same week
yes,
we were there too. Yeah,
I
that
had
was
super good timing. Yeah,
fun. Well, hey, thanks for hopping on the phone. You're in Berlin, Germany, and I'm in Lawrence, Kansas. And
correct.
yep, for those that are tuning in, and Nina Katchadourian is a multidisciplinary artist, one of my favorites, and it's really great to have you on this little program that I put together during these weird days called Artists and the Art That They Live With.
Mm.
And I'm hoping that you've got something that you want to share with us today.
Definitely. So maybe I'll start by saying that I split my time between New York and Berlin, and I've been doing that now for 2.5 years or so. Um, and when my husband and I moved here, we really came with very little stuff. We basically came with a suitcase each. And there's been a kind of funny process of gradually over many trips back and forth bringing things over. But there's a lot that we really haven't brought yet. Like we basically still have all our books in Brooklyn, and gradually I've been sort of bringing some of the art things that we have hung on our walls in Brooklyn, like squirreling them over in suitcases when I come. But there's something I think quite nice. There was something quite nice for us about having a very empty space when we arrived here. So as opposed to like the intensely stuffed full of stuff situation at our place in Brooklyn. So this question about the art that I live with right now is a funny one because it was only literally 5 days ago that we took the plunge and hung the first artwork on the wall of this apartment after literally 2.5 years of living in this city. And the thing that we hung was a gift that was given to me by a dear family friend named Janet Purdy. She is the person who introduced my parents to one another. And it's kind of a good story that I might divert for a moment to tell because it might kind of fit into a bigger theme here of sort of the weird way that things that from very different parts of the world sometimes cross over. And for me, an example very close at hand of that phenomenon is actually my parents. So my mother grew up in Finland. She is from a Swedish speaking minority within Finland. So she kind of is Finnish, but kind of not only Finnish in a way. And my dad, who is ethnically Armenian, grew up in Beirut, where there's a very big community of Armenians. And Janet, the family friend, was an American woman, is an American woman who my mom met when she did a study abroad year in the US. She came to the University of Madison, Wisconsin, did the study abroad year, became good friends with Janet. And Janet went to Beirut in the 60s, which was this kind of like crazy, amazing time. Beirut was known as the Paris of the Middle East, and it was just this, it is a beautiful, vibrant city and a place then that a lot of people were sort of going to. It was a very cool place to be. Janet met my father in Beirut. Janet and her husband met my father in Beirut. And Janet, who is sort of like always her whole life been a total matchmaker, thought to herself, I think Haran would really enjoy meeting my friend Stina, my mom. So she set this up. She set up this elaborate sort of, blind date, you could say, which involved convincing my father to create a research position which would allow him to hire my mother to do psychiatric research in this village in the hills outside of Beirut in Lebanon. on. They were going to do psychiatric research in this village that was an Armenian village. And my mom took the job. So she went to Beirut, met my dad, and then the story goes, they were engaged. They fell in love on the way home from the airport. They got engaged 6 weeks later and were married 6 months later in Finland. So that's kind of the frame of some of the characters involved. Yeah, and my parents have always said to me, please don't do that to us. It was very stressful for our families. So neither me or my brother did that to my parents. But Janet, back to Janet. Janet is this amazing person who, in some sense, I've kind of adopted as my godmother. She's technically my brother's godmother, but she is sort of mine now too. And Janet has traveled in some of the most unusual ways and to some of the most unusual places of anyone I can think of. She and her first husband went across, huge parts of the Asian continent in a VW bus with their 3-year-old daughter, actually, at one point. Months and months and months of travel. They went through Afghanistan. They saw those incredible Buddhas carved into the hills that the Taliban later blew up, and all kinds of places you can't even go anymore. And Janet, throughout her travels and throughout her life, amassed a lot of amazing objects. And she now, for other long story reasons, lives in Perth, Australia, because she fell in love with an Aussie and lives there, Jack, who's a fantastic guy. And her New York apartment, where she lived for a long time, had become a kind of, to me, it was like a museum, of her life and of all these objects and all these places she had been. And I documented it actually quite carefully before she decided to make the move and leave New York. So what we're coming up towards in the story is this object, which was an object that, a painting that was in her apartment that I saw for years and years and years of visiting her there, and which I always really, really, really loved. And Janet decided when she was leaving New York to sort of ask me, like, is there anything you'd want from my apartment? And I asked for this painting, and she gave it to me. And the painting is a painting of Saint Anthony. It was something that she bought in Beirut in the 60s. I'm not sure exactly when the painting was made. I don't think that's known, actually, but I'd say it's probably from, it's not an old painting. It's from sometime in the 20th century. And what it says on the painting in Arabic is from the family of Haddad. There's kind of an inscription at the top of the painting, who we can assume probably is the family that commissioned the painting.
Right.
And it was acquired from, what she's told me in her notes is it was acquired from Abbé Pierre's place in Beirut. I'm not sure I know exactly what that means, actually. I've got to get back to her and ask her to explain what or where or who Abbé Pierre is. But anyway, I have sort of looked at this painting for a long time, for decades, like in her apartment, and now it's here in Berlin, and it, I brought it in my suitcase, feeling sort of worried that customs might open it up and say, like, what the hell is this thing? Because,
Right.
it has the look of something that, like, I could have stolen from the Met, It's very, very beautiful to me. And as I said, it's the first thing that we hung up. We hung it up last week in our living room. And what I like about where it is right now is that it's this sort of ancient looking object in the middle of a very modern looking room. And we've just been kind of standing in the living room and looking at it and going, there's just something really special about the way that the old and the new can meet and share space. And what's special to me too about the living room is that I have 2 carpets on the floor that come from my father's family's home in Beirut, where they had to flee the civil war, and it's miraculous these carpets kind of made it out. So in many ways, both the St. Anthony painting and other things in the room lead me back to this kind of family history that I have in Beirut. So that's my story. That's the long story of St. Anthony.
Well, that's brilliant. That's that's a great sort of background to the whole thing. And isn't that the layers that the things that we surround ourselves with start to have as time passes? I think that's one of the special things about it. Not just art. It could be any object or anything from our own history. But then when all those layers start to intersect. you know?
Totally. And I mean, one thing that I think about quite a lot is that, I mean, you and I, we're both like contemporary artists. I mean, we both, I think, are, making our work in relationship to sort of things that are the result of the here and now that we live in, or that sort of, in some ways, um, I don't know. I think of my work as kind of in a conversation with other things that happen around me. Like now, I make a lot of things that are really connected to the very mundane things that surround me. Really, like I often say, the dumb stuff that surrounds me. That I'm trying to kind of look towards what seems so boring and lacking in possibility as a place to sort of find my work. So I find it like very freeing somehow, I would even say, when I go to museums, to not go and look at contemporary work, but to look at work that really comes from kind of a time period very far away from the here and now. And Berlin is a city full of wonderful museums I cannot visit at the moment, but one of my favorite museums here has become the Gemälde Gallery, which is the sort of it's the painting gallery, but where there are amazing paintings by artists like Lucas Cranach. He's kind of become one of my favorite German painters, 15th century, I hope I have that right, German painter, and just these sort of often religious themes. I mean, that's kind of what people were painting for a long time. But I guess maybe I feel really excited about having a Saint Anthony on my wall, in part because it also makes me think about these biblical themes or older painting themes that are not at all what I tend to put into my work. It's sort of like a totally different bank of subject matter. And for me, there's something really, I don't know, just really amazing about living with a lineage of subject matter that sort of comes from a different tradition. That might be one way of putting it. A different time and place, a different way of making images, a different priority around making images.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, Nina, it was really great to see you again. And I
Thanks, Ben.
hope you guys are doing well, and I hope to see you in person someday soon.
Me too.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Good to see
Thank
you.
you. You too.
Bye-bye. Still trying to stop the recording.
Always a fun